companies are getting involved? It's more about a clever bit of marketing to keep selling tickets to attractions, or do you think they really do want to see change made, and it's not about the ticket sales, it's about bringing change to the animals' lives?
Well, yes, I'm obviously aware about people's skepticism, and I kind of put myself in that place as well in the past, when operators and travel companies have made such statements. But I think by us being involved in this process, by initially contacting these operators, working directly with people who buy the product, people who promote the product, I'm convinced that they take it seriously, and I'm convinced that they will address the practices that we know cause animal significant suffering and threaten their survival. It's other areas where things can be improved. That remains, that sort of grey area, and that is where we're now going to be focused. And particularly with Thomas Cook 2017, we're going to be focused on a strategy that will ensure that they deliver on this promise. And you've got my personal guarantee and that of the organisation that we're not just going to let this situation be greenwashed. By us being involved, we intend to see some successes, both short-term and long-term.
You said you're worldwide, but I believe you're based in the UK. And,
yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it's often said that the UK is a nation of animal lovers, but to be perfectly honest, some would say it really isn't. How can we, from the UK or the West Europe or Western world, go up to another culture and tell them the way they treat animals is wrong and should be changed, when we don't have a good background in it ourselves? Is it just people saying do as we say, not as we do?
Well, I think I personally think that the UK is a country of animal lovers, and you can certainly see that by the numbers of domestic animals that are kept as pets, which far outweigh the numbers of domestic animals kept as pets in other countries. So that's a clear indication that people in the UK like to have animals around and enjoy their company, or enjoy seeing them in their natural habitat, as would tend to suggest by the TV programs such as Planet Earth 2 and so on, which is identified as being one of the most popular programs at the moment. So I think there's a lot of indication that people in this country want to see animals in good conditions and treated well. As far as how we impose that ideology on other countries, I think that my feedback would be mixed. I think on issues such as bullfighting and bull running and that kind of thing, as you find in Spain, I think that's definitely something that needs to be decided on by the Spanish people, and they make the decision about what practices they should do within their own country. But obviously we can support our colleagues in those countries with information and other means to ensure animals are best protected. But I think as far as this announcement from Thomas Cook is concerned, and hopefully other tour operators will follow with their lead, is that these are attractions that have nothing to do with cultural or traditional practices. Zoos have only been around since the Victorian times, when people traveled the world and they wanted to show other people about the curiosities of the animals that they found, sort of like living museums. Well, we're far away from that now. People know what a tiger looks like, and thanks to TV programs, we know how they live and what they need. So we don't need to keep them in captivity any longer, and there certainly isn't a conservation benefit in doing so. So I think as far as zoos and dolphinaria and circuses and all that kind of thing is concerned, it's not a cultural or traditional issue. It's the fact is that these animals are suffering in those situations, and we need to do something about it.
You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. When it comes to animal protection, its most common problem is speciesism, which is a word I do struggle to pronounce. It's a word I don't like, but it's where you favour some sort of animals over others. So it's very bad if somebody mistreats a cat, but it's okay if somebody mistreats a chicken as long as it's for food. Or for the dairy industry, if you look into the dairy industry, that can be very cruel if you find out what happens to the newborn calves. So it all depends on what the animal's being used for, whether it counts as cruelty or not. When I had World Animal Protection on the show earlier in the year, they said they were concerned about wild animals, and animals bred for farms didn't come under their scope. I spoke to Thomas Cook via email, so it's not on the show, about how their animal attraction policy, how wide the spread is, because Thomas Cook Sport, as I'll mention in a minute, do sell tickets and packages for the Grand National. And since 2000, 11 horses have died during the Grand National race. And as I said to Daniel during the interview, at the time I recorded it, 129 racehorses have died this year on British racetracks. So I wanted to know whether an attraction with wild animals is more important than an attraction with a sporting activity, such as with horses, or we only spoke about sport this time. So that was the next thing. I wanted to know whether Born Free were disconcerted about the cute animals, the big cats, the elephants, or whether they do look after animals in all situations. I've spoken to Thomas Cook about sporting activities as well as animal attractions, and 129 horses have been killed on UK racecourses so far this year, but Thomas Cook still does Grand National. Thomas Cook Sport does the Grand National tickets. They're saying that sporting isn't the same as activity. Does the animal have to be caged before somebody like you gets involved, or is sport activities okay?
No, not at all. I mean, we're talking about all animals, whether they're wild, captive, or in the wild, or whether they're domestic animals, whether they're used in a working practice such as horses, donkeys, mules. All animals used in tourism practices is the key focus here. And as far as what Thomas Cook is going to do and when, we will find out when we start looking at the strategy in early part of next year. And then that will include the scope as well, which animals in which capacity and what we hope to achieve from this collaboration.
That's good to hear. Us a year or so ago, I had another animal charity on, and they, as far as they're concerned, animals in domestic situations such as farming or sport weren't counted. It was only, I suppose you could say, the pretty ones, the big cats or the elephants.
No, they're definitely, they all have needs, irrespective of species or where they're kept. And so, as far as this announcement is concerned, and the work of Born Free, Born Free tends to focus on wild animals in captivity and in the wild. But in the case of tourism practices, I work with colleagues from other organisations, but through Born Free, creating kind of like a one-stop shop. Otherwise, there are so many people to talk to. And so through that one-stop shop, sort of working with other colleagues, we're able to cover other animals in other situations. But ultimately, our goal here is to eradicate the really awful practices that you find around the world as best we can. And for those attractions that exist for whatever reason, we need to make sure that they're meeting best practice standards.
I don't envy you, because that's going to be quite a task. I used to be a travel agent, and I was taken on what's called a fam trip to a Caribbean island. And they didn't take us to one attraction, dolphins, because the locals didn't like it and they felt it was a bit bad. But they took us to a turtle farm, which I think 2 years ago was ranked one of the top 3 worst animal attractions in the world. So it's different to get people to look at one animal and say, no, that's bad, and another animal say, that's good, and get everybody to have the same approach to every animal. So you're going to have a long job on your hands.
Yes, welcome to the daily workload that we have here. It's very easy to get people enthused and engaged with animals such as lions, tigers, elephants. But when you're dealing with snakes, spiders, and I don't know, crocodiles, the same enthusiasm isn't there. But our work is, as I say, focused on all species, and yes, it's an uphill struggle, but we are confident that we're going to see some change.
I'm an animal lover, and I have to admit it's very hard. If you're on, I was in Mexico 2 years ago, and somebody comes up with was it a lemur or whatever it's called on their shoulder, it's very hard not to go up to it and give it a cuddle. What should tourists say to themselves before they take their step to approach any animal in any situation?
Well, I think it depends on the animal to some degree. If it's a wild animal, so this would in a wild animal free in the wild, or a wild animal in a captive situation, wild animals are naturally unpredictable, and they're also they also get stressed out with close proximity of people. So the unpredictable nature plus that distress of being close to humans tends to get some negative reactions, such as aggression, or maybe some reptiles, for example, will defecate, and within that they will transfer disease such as salmonella. So there are things to be aware of, and it's not always concerns over physical injury, but it's also concerns over disease transmission that people should be aware of, and obviously the welfare of the animal in that regard. Obviously domestic animals, dogs, cats, etc., farm animals to a degree, they're more used to having that close proximity, and in fact some of those animals tend to crave it, particularly dogs. So as long as you respect the animal and its space and its welfare, then there's no harm in that contact, particularly if the animal is craving it.
You can follow me on Twitter at holiday_hut. UK holiday makers make up a tiny fraction of the world tourists. Is this type of action taken by Thomas Cook and with help from yourselves just the UK thing, or are other countries taking part as well? Because otherwise I can see a two-tier attraction. There'd be a premium one for the countries and the people who are concerned about animal welfare, and a cheap one for everybody else. And then eventually I guess people won't go to the expensive one, they'll just end up going to the cheap one anyway.
Yes, I mean that's definitely a problem that's on our agenda. I mean, obviously, as you say, the UK population or the UK tour operators do not monopolise a lot of the tourism markets, and so if British tour operators no longer allow elephant riding, various other markets from other countries still do. So the suppliers still carry on with the practices that we're trying to eradicate, and we're no further down the road for change. So what we are trying to do, particularly by working with the larger multinational tour operators such as Thomas Cook, we're hoping to try to monopolize that market. So when the tour operator says to the supplier, I need you to meet these minimum requirements, or I need you to remove this activity from your zoo or excursion, then they listen and they do what has been asked of them. And so this is very much a step by